All these things happen within a flash, you know, and it's quite hard to describe everything in detail because it just bang.
I decided to cook hot chips for lunch and had turned the pot on, and then we had no bread, so because the shop's just like 200 metres down the road, I thought I'd turn the pot off, went out for dinner. I was asleep in the room and the kids were here playing, and so I left them here because I would only be like 5 minutes, and hadn't turned the pot off properly, but I thought I had. And on my way back, one of our neighbours stopped me to have a talk. And so I was sitting right down the hill so I could see our house, sitting in the car having a talk to our neighbour. And then the next minute I saw the sliding door open and our son was running out dragging his little sister, and all this black smoke came pouring out of the top of the house.
As soon as I heard her yelling at, there's a fire, I sort of ran out of my room and into the kitchen here, and the first thing I did was I grabbed the pot. Flames were spilling from the pot onto the carpet, burnt the carpet, the lounge, as I was going along. Part of it was spilling on my hand, and it was spilling all over the floor. And then the door was open, right? And I sort of hefted over the veranda, and then I ran back in. And I grabbed the blanket out of my room. We had a nice green mink blanket, one of those big nice mink blankets, and then I just started, trying to put it out, just trying to bang it out.
And the blanket was flammable, so that went straight up.
Yeah.
Straight up into a ball of fire. So he was throwing things onto the deck that were catching fire, and as he was running through the house, the carpet was catching fire, the curtains were catching fire, one of the cushions of the couch caught fire. So he's throwing everything out and it's all catching fire, and I'm trying to throw it over the deck because the deck is wood, so that's going to catch fire too.
I ran back inside because part of the cupboard was still on fire, and I grabbed another blanket and I put that out. So I managed to put out the flames, and there was still heaps of smoke in the house. And I think this is where I get a bit lost because I'm not too sure exactly what happened, because I was sort of banging the spur of the moment thing, and as I got outside the door, I think that's where I felt the burn of the hand, and so I sort of threw it, and part of the pot got splashed onto my daughter's face, not her hands, on her legs, and I didn't really know it until I saw my daughter, her hand was sort of melting away over this side here, and part of her clothing was on fire. It was like seeing a dummy, a wax dummy, and you see a wax dummy being melted before you. Well, this is what I saw with my daughter. And so I grabbed her, picked her up, and then I ran out onto the grass and tried to sort of roll over to put out the fire. When the fire brigade came up, my wife took baby down the hill, and I think that's when I was in shock. I was putting my hand underneath the water because I just went into a bit of a state of shock right there and then. So I was just sitting there and I was just in another world. Another fireman walked up and says, "Oh, you better go down to the ambulance since you've burnt yourself too. Get yourself checked out, you're the father, go with your family." And so I ended up in the ambulance with my wife and my daughter.
And they were afraid that because she had been burnt on her neck, that her windpipe might swell quickly and that would stop her from being able to breathe. So they told us that she was quite serious and that they would be getting her to hospital as soon as they could.
And just seeing my daughter there just suffering, it was terrible. Terrible just to see your daughter suffering, and she's screaming because the ambulance people were trying to do something for her and she wouldn't let them. She doesn't like people touching her, and they were cutting up her clothes and ripping off her clothes,
and they put her into ICU pretty quickly in about 20 minutes, and then we were asked to wait outside for about 4 hours, and the next time we saw her she was on a respirator. When we saw her, her whole face had swollen so that her head looked like a big balloon.
Mm.
And that was really scary to see her like that. We couldn't even recognise her.
Yeah.
She just, yeah, it was really... Yeah, that probably was the scariest part, going back in to see her. But they told us that keeping her sedated and making sure that she wasn't able to wake up would be better for her for the first couple of days, so that she wouldn't fight being on the different machines and things like that.
She would have like half an eye open, and then the other eye might be able to open up a little bit, and, you know, and that was really scary, seeing our daughter wake up when she wasn't even supposed to be, and I think that's when it really hit me too, because she couldn't talk, she couldn't yell, she just sort of woke up and a part of her eyes were open, and then she'll just jump back down, and maybe an hour later then she'll wake back up, you know.
I was blaming myself for leaving the pot on, and he was blaming himself because our son had tried to wake him up when the fire had started, and he thought he was just being annoying, so he told him to go away and play. And so yeah, we were doing a lot of, oh, what if we did this? And at that time we couldn't really talk to each other properly. Like, communicating with each other was really hard because it was just emotional, eh?
Mm.
So we just kind of just sat there waiting and hoping she'd be right.
In the hospital itself, I guess those feelings just sort of started to build up more and more and more, with that more guilt building upon you, and I just really felt for my little girl.
I think that's why I was crying the most. I kept apologising to my daughter in the ambulance. And yeah, when I rang my mum to tell her, I really felt that it was my fault. I didn't think it was Danelle's fault. I thought it was mine because I had made the initial mistake. And I just wish it had been me instead of my daughter that had been hurt.
I've never ever thought that my little girl would die. No, you know, I had a lot of faith in God, because we're religious people. We felt that we'd been blessed, and I knew that my little girl was a little fighter. She's a real feisty, and she's very strong. Eh?
She wakes up about 4 times a night and she'll be screaming, and so that becomes a bit hard to cope with. Just for her, feeling for her, not really the lack of sleep or anything. But
it's sort of a long term for our little girl anyway, and because we don't know much about scarring and what it's going to have, what kind of an effect it's going to have on her, because we've never been through it before. We don't know what kind of psychological effect it's going to have on her in the long term either. I think for us, we'll get over it, you know, we'll cope, but really it isn't about us, it's about her and how well she's going to cope and how well she's going to interrelate within our family and with other children at school.
tomorrow we go in for pressure garments, which will help the scarring. At the moment the scar tissue's becoming thick, and because she's Māori it would be more noticeable if she had big thick. Apparently we have thicker skin than Pākehā people. So yeah, she gets pressure garments for her legs, and the webbing in her hand is quite bad. Probably what we should have done, just close the doors and run away.
Yeah.
I mean, we were told by the insurance assessor, you should have just let your housemate down because you had insurance, but you don't think about that.
It's quite surprising. It's easy for an insurance assessor to say, "I'll just let it burn down," but oh no, this is my family home. This is where my parents and my mum, my grandparents, you know, and it meant a lot to me. It was a sort of a personal thing. But the thing is that my daughter is more important than the home, and I think that's where I got the priority wrong. We didn't even have smoke alarms, you know. And, you know, I just think how thick I am, eh? That I don't know if other homes have lit smoke alarms. I think that's probably one of the first things that each home should have is something so that they can let, you know, just imagine if it was at night time and we were asleep and that happened, eh? You know, far out, it could have been a lot worse. Her being pregnant and we needed to watch out for her blood pressure and make sure that it didn't get up too high, yeah. But she did really well.
You can talk a lot about, you know, what you can do with a fire, but when you're actually in that situation and you see what's happening, you don't do what's logical. You just do what is instinctive, and it's not necessarily the cleverest thing. It's usually the dumbest thing that you can do. That's what you're going to do.
We were so happy that our son did the right thing, you know, that he took our sister outside. He forgot about me, but that's...
Well, he did try to wake
He
you, but
did
you
try to
told
wake
him
me,
to
you
go
know.
away.
But, you know, he got our daughter outside and he did the right thing, and I think good on him, you know. A little boy of 4 years old can do something like that. I just hope that other kids in that kind of situation might be able to do the same thing.